Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Capstone Lecture Series Master of Liberal Arts Series dedicated to exploring the topic of the modern university. I think most of you know I'm still Steve Ehrlich, Interim Dean of University College. I also want to I also want to take this opportunity to thank all of you for being here today, attending all of our past lectures and supporting the MLA series, along with all other University College activities over the years. I see a lot of familiar faces here. It's great. Your support for and recognition that learning, especially lifelong learning, is not preparation for life, but it is life itself, as Dewey reminded us. And it's the foundation of everything we do in University College. So thanks again for all you bring. Many of you attended the earlier talks delivered by three important voices in arts and sciences, Bob Wildenberg, Jen Smith, Barbara Shaw, each based on their own professional experiences as teachers and scholars, but also as important administrative leaders at Washington University, outlined the roots, aims, challenges, and opportunities of great academic institutions like this one. They all posed vexing questions and urged us to think more critically and responsibly about the university's role in preparing an increasingly diverse group of learners for an increasingly complex world. They spoke about liberal and professional education, discovery and research, teaching and learning, innovation and entrepreneurship, and about ways that a great university supports informed and civil debate about the most vital and sometimes unsettling issues of the times. But how do we do all of this and keep things moving forward? And especially in relation to an organization like Washington University that arguably defies organization, at least conventionally speaking, one that's notoriously decentralized among 7 schools, 7 sub-organizations. We're what's called in the field of organizational theory a complex organization. And some say run it like a business. Others say doing so will run our enterprise into the ground. And still others argue that we need more business skills, but the culture of higher education is not that of the private sector and requires a hybrid model of management. Clearly, this debate is front and center when you think about the modern university. And this, at least in part, is why we have provosts to help us ask the right questions and to answer them thoughtfully. Holden Thorp is Provost and Executive Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs at Washington University, joining us July 1st, 2013. He is the Rita Levi-Montalcini Distinguished University Professor and holds appointments in both chemistry and medicine. Holden joined the university after spending 3 decades at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, where he served as the 10th Chancellor from 2008 through 2013. A North Carolina native, he earned an undergraduate degree in chemistry at UNC, a doctorate in chemistry at California Institute of Technology, and completed postdoctoral work at Yale. In his research career, Holden developed technology for electronic DNA chips and co-founded Viamet Pharmaceuticals, which is commercializing new drugs for fungal disease and prostate cancer. And he's currently a member of the National Security Higher Education Advisory Board, the Board of Trustees at the National Humanities Center, the Board of Trustees at the St. Louis Symphony Orchestra, and the Board of Directors of Barnes Jewish Hospital. He also plays a mean jazz bass, guitar, and piano. So would you please join me in welcoming Holden Thorp to tell us why the university is not a business today.
Okay, Steve, thanks. And thanks for putting this series together, and thanks to all of you for coming out and hearing my talk. This is something I've been working on, some of these thoughts for the last year or so, because I wrote a book 5 years ago called Engines of Innovation, which is about how universities should do more to realize the applications of a lot of their research. And I still feel strongly about that, and I'll put that in context later. But one of the things that happened was a lot of people took that book and said, you know, because I've been involved in business and because I wrote this book saying universities should do a better job at business, that I wanted the whole university to be run like a business. And that's exactly the opposite of what I was trying to, my co-author and I were trying to say. We were trying to say that when the university does do business, it should do it in partnership with businesses, because the university itself is not a business. And we've been trying to put some structure around that, because one of the things that Steve said we see quite a lot are universities deciding that because they can't make their revenue, or because certain kinds of education are not in vogue right now, that they're having trouble with their budget, and so the way to fix this is to get somebody who's run a budget in a business to come run the budget in the university. And most of the time, this doesn't work out so well. And I'm going to give you a few examples, but you could just get the Chronicle of Higher Education on any day and find 4 or 5 examples of this not working. This past month alone, we have the president of Mount St. Mary's, who is a hedge fund manager, who said at a faculty meeting that they wanted to get the students who weren't going to graduate out of the university quickly, and so they needed to drown the bunnies and put a Glock to their head. And you can imagine this didn't go over so well. This is the kind of thing that gets said in the boardroom at a hedge fund maybe, but not such a good thing to say at a faculty meeting. And they got a huge mess on their hands up there. But Mount St. Mary's was in budget trouble, and they thought, okay, let's get a hedge fund manager to come run the university. The University of Iowa picked a guy who was the CEO of Boston Chicken to come be the president of the university. He may actually be able to help them, but he's probably never going to really find out whether he can get anything done, because the faculty are so upset that he hasn't gone through a faculty meeting yet without just people screaming. And so it's not going too well up there. I hope for the University of Iowa actually that it settles down, because he's probably not going anywhere, and that's a very important school. But you know, there are reasons why it was hard to implement that. So this is happening continuously. And so what I'm hoping is by framing and sharing some of these thoughts with people, that either universities will not do this so often, or if they do, that the business people who take these jobs, and there are lots of business folks who transition to the university and do it well, but it's usually because they take the time to learn what it is that we're doing and what the culture of it is and how we operate and what the constraints are. And you know, we could benefit from great financial management and excellent operations and the kinds of things that people associate with the business world. But what we do isn't quantified in the same way that it would be in the business world. And so, you know, we need to do a better job of explaining what that is to the world. And that's really what I'm working on. People ask me all the time, you know, why are there so many editorials in the Wall Street Journal and all these books about higher education and everything that's wrong with it? And I believe the reason is that we haven't done a good enough job of explaining our own stories. So I think we all have to, and I appreciate you coming out to be part of this. We've all got to band together and explain to people what it is we're doing. Because if folks don't get it, then that's on us to do a better job of explaining it. And so a lot of what's in this talk, for those faculty here, isn't to sway faculty. Most of the faculty who came to this talk, as far as the thesis of the talk is concerned, you could all leave now, because I think most of you agree with the title. But what it is that this talk is about is what to say to somebody who doesn't agree with us. Because I believe it can't just be provosts and chancellors that are making that case. We've tried that. and we're doing the best we can. But we need the faculty and students to help us explain to the public what the university is and what it's for. And so my co-author and I are writing another book that's about this, and the title's going to be Higher Calling, because we believe that almost everyone can buy into the notion that the university does something that is a higher purpose than just turning out degrees and getting people jobs, or only producing knowledge that we know what to do with in a way that's going to change the human condition in a short time. So this talk is about how to make the case that what the university is up to is a higher calling than just producing degrees. And interestingly, I borrowed the tactics for this talk from a business school professor. And one of the things about business schools, and so now people are going to say, well, you're down in the business school. I'm not down in the business school either. I think business schools do important research and help a lot of students do things they want to do. And business school professors tend to be really, really great teachers because there's a lot of emphasis in the business school on the surveys that they get from their students about how good the teaching is. And Jeff Timmons is a famous teacher of entrepreneurship who sadly passed away, but he created the entrepreneurship program at Babson College. And he always uses movies to get his talk going, okay, and to keep people engaged through his talk. And so I'm stealing that tactic from him, as I do in a lot of talks like this that I give. And I've chosen as my, text or whatever you want to call it, The Magnificent Seven. Magnificent Seven is kind of an old-fashioned movie, and it's got some imagery and things in it that aren't really completely coincident with the ideals of the university at the moment. But the reason I use this is a lot of people who think that the university should be run as a business are also people who think The Magnificent Seven is a great movie. And I think The Magnificent Seven is a great movie, even though not all the politics are exactly in line with my own philosophy. And the music is, of course, the greatest music maybe in all of cinema. Okay, so here's the WashU mission statement. And if you think the university is business, you have a hard time finding anything in here to convince yourself that that's true. We protect the freedom of inquiry. We disseminate knowledge and produce it to teaching and learning, and we do a lot of things to enhance the lives and livelihood of people in St. Louis and beyond. We don't take any of the money that we make that's extra at the end of the year and give it to anyone. We usually about break even, and when we make a little money, we take it and invest it in basically the infinite list of new things that we want to do that we can't fund. So the university, if a business returns profits to shareholders, then we're certainly not that. The other thing that we cannot do is we can't go out of business. And people say, well, this is obvious. But it's actually really important. A business can go out of business. And people in St. Louis are probably as acutely aware of this as you would be anywhere, because Anheuser-Busch isn't here anymore, and TWA isn't here anymore. And 35 years ago, if you'd said, what are the most important things in St. Louis, almost everything somebody listed would be a Fortune 500 company. But now most people would say, what are the most important things in St. Louis? And they'd say Washington University and BJC and the other educational institutions in the Botanical Garden. So businesses come and go. And when you're running a business, of course you're not planning to go out of business, but you can make decisions that could put the company out of business and do so, not be doing anything immoral. Because you may say, we're going to make a huge bet on this. Well, the university can't do this because every time universities have tried to go out of business, if they're a university that anybody has any long-standing connection to, it usually doesn't work. And the most famous example of this is Sweetbriar College, which is a women's college in Virginia. They don't have enough money to stay open. They're not making enough in terms of tuition revenue. They have to give so much financial aid that they can't get students who are paying them enough of a margin to stay open. They don't have a significant endowment. And so they made the hard decision to close it. And there were, of course, enormous protests from all the people who got degrees from Sweetbriar College, thinking that when they got their degree from Sweetbriar College, that they were getting from them a commitment that they wouldn't go away. And the Attorney General of Virginia ordered the school to reopen. It's a private school. But the Attorney General still ordered Sweetbriar to reopen, and they have absolutely no idea how they're going to pay to be in business. I mean, I don't know how this one's going to play out. So Sweetbriar is going to reopen. They probably have enough money to stay open for a year or two, but it's nobody knows exactly what's going to happen with this. And the same thing's true Washington University. Everybody here is absolutely insistent, and they should be, that we're still going to be here 100 years from now, 200 years from now, 500 years from now. Oxford and Cambridge and the University of Bologna are still here. All right, and so it means that there's a class of decisions that you cannot make if they're decisions that, if they don't work out, are going to put the university out of business. And it also means you have to have a permanent constituency that is involved in making decisions, and administrators and business leaders are not permanent. We're not permanent. WashU has been fortunate to have provosts and chancellors who stayed around a long time, but that is very unusual in higher education. The average tenure for a provost in the Association of American Universities, which is the top 62 research universities, is only 2.5 years. So we can't have people who are only around 2.5 years making decisions for the university by themselves, because they're not going to be here to see whether they work out or not. And that's maybe hard for people to understand at WashU, like I said, because we've been so fortunate here. But for our colleagues around the country, this is really important, and that's why we have shared governance. A lot of people wonder, why do you let the faculty who don't really have experience running things, be so involved in so many of the decisions? And the reason is they're the permanent constituency. The administrators come and go, and the faculty, they don't stay here forever, but there's always a faculty, and it does evolve to some extent and in their views on things, but the faculty is the permanent constituency of the university that has to be entrusted with a permanent institution. And administrators hopefully understand that and embrace that, but we're not around forever. And that's a really important feature of all this. Okay, we also can't just get out of stuff. WashU had a dental school and we had civil engineering, and we got rid of those. Before I got here, I had nothing to do with it. I wasn't here. I was in middle school when the dental school was shut down. Well, maybe not quite middle school. I was probably an associate professor or something like that. But I've never been to an alumni event where I didn't get chewed out about the dental school and civil engineering. And so we are not free in the same way that a business is to get out of lines of business. Because when we do it, it causes great, great pain. Because the people who got a dental degree from Washington University believed we would always be giving a dental degree. And they're very, very hurt, and I understand it, that we don't do that anymore. The University of Alabama at Birmingham has no business playing big-time college football. They're in a state where there's a much more famous public college football team. They have a great basketball program, and basketball is easier to do at a smaller place. The UAB is a great school because they have an excellent medical school. It's really the best medical school in the Deep South by far. And they hired a guy I know named Bill Carr, who is a sports person. Bill Carr is not somebody who you would bring in if you wanted to harm your intercollegiate athletics program. Okay, he was the consultant to me when I hired the athletic director and the football coach at North Carolina before I left. He's, in my opinion, the very best sports consultant there is. He wrote a report saying there's no way in the world it makes sense for UAB to play football. So the president decided they were going to get out of football, and there was a protest, and there were so many protests that the president had to go apologize for shutting down football, and now UAB is going to have to operate football, and they're going to have to take money from arts and sciences and financial aid and things like that in order to pay for it. Okay, so just like the dental school and civil engineering, this isn't like, there's these books by Jim Collins where he's talking about, what makes companies great. And he's got this famous anecdote in there about how what made Walgreens great was they had the courage to shut down the lunch counter. Remember Walgreens, before they were a big industrial behemoth that competes with CVS, were, town drugstores with lunch counter. And, operating the lunch counter was really complicated and very hard to do the same way at every single store. And so what was really great about Walgreens is this courageous CEO, despite everybody saying it was a bad idea, had the courage to shut down Walgreens. And if you bought Walgreens stock right at the time that he did that, you made a huge amount of money, because when the lunch counter was shut down at Walgreens, that was the ushering in of the dominance of Walgreens. We don't get to make decisions like that. My former colleagues at UNC Chapel Hill they have the bookstore at UNC is a long-standing tradition. It's much more central to the campus, and everybody loves the UNC bookstore. Most colleges like WashU have decided to outsource the bookstore to a company called Follett. Follett does a great job. They make a little money for you. You take the extra money and put it in financial aid. And if you don't have a bookstore that everybody thinks is important, an institution on its own, then you can do that, and it's a great thing. But nobody in Chapel Hill wants them to shut down the bookstore, even though Follett could operate it for more money, give more money to a part of the university that probably really, really needs it. And who knows what they're going to do with that. So you can't make a simple business decision in our environment in the same way. And then you have to be sure that the people that you bring in understand all this stuff. The University of Michigan decided that they wanted to run Michigan athletics like a business, so they hired a guy named Dave Brandon, who was the CEO of Domino's, to come run Michigan athletics. He made it 4 years, and after 4 years, there were 1,000 people on the quad asking for his resignation. The board still completely supported him, but the board can't do anything when there's 1,000 people on the quad. There's 1,000 people on the quad. It doesn't matter. Sorry, David. It doesn't matter what the board thinks. You can't. There's no way to sustain Dave Brandon through this event. So he left, and then he went to go be the CEO of Toys R Us. If you're interested in university politics and all of this, I highly recommend this book called End Zone, which is about a really good by a really good journalism professor at Michigan, and it has lots of inside stuff about what went wrong here. And the thing that's interesting is that the thing that got Dave Brandon was the student ticket distribution. So the reason all these students were out there is that he changed the way the student tickets were distributed at the big house, and nobody liked it, and that started this whole controversy. Now, the student tickets, the students don't pay. So if you're a businessman, you can't imagine that you're going to lose your job based on something that you're giving away for free, all right? Unless somebody has explained to you that this is a environment where we don't use money as a scorekeeping system in the same way as the business world. So you can't close the university, and so you can't make all or nothing decisions that bet the whole university on something. You can't get rid of civil engineering and the dental school without a lot of pain. And you also have people here for lots of different reasons. And that's what makes the university so interesting. And that's what brings me to another organization where there are people there for a lot of different reasons. And that is the Magnificent Seven. Okay, now most of you know The Magnificent Seven is, of course, based on The Seven Samurai, which is a film by Akira Kurosawa. But that film doesn't have the same score by Elmer Bernstein that The Magnificent Seven does. So the Magnificent Seven are a group of people who come together for 7 radically different reasons. And they are hired by a village in Mexico to defend them against a bad guy. And I think as you see how this comes together, you might be able to hopefully see how it's connected to this talk.
We need help.
We must buy guns. We know nothing about them. Will you buy guns for us?
Guns are very expensive and hard to get. Why don't you hire men?
Men?
Gunmen. Nowadays, men are cheaper than guns.
Will you go? It will be a blessing if you came to help us.
Sorry, I'm not in the blessing business.
No, we offer more than that. We could feed you every day. And we have this.
What's that?
We can sell this for gold. Everything we own. Everything of value in the village.
I've been offered a lot for my work. But never everything.
Would it be enough?
Okay, so he's been offered a lot for his work, but never everything. Okay, this is not a traditional business transaction for him. He's motivated by a sense of duty to these folks who've come to see him. Okay, so now they have one person in the Magnificent Seven, and you would wonder, how are they going to get enough people to beat the bad guys? So now they go try to get somebody else to join them.
I did hear of a job below the border shooting for flies away from my village, but I can't find out what it paid.
$20.
A week.
6 weeks, no job.
Oh, that's ridiculous. You heard of anything?
Yeah. Below the border, shooting some flies away from a little village. Their village.
Pays $20.
Looking for men right now.
I wouldn't even take my bullets. Ours is a poor village.
We understand. You could get much more in a grocery store, and it's good, steady work.
Okay, so Steve McQueen's going to join the Magnificent Seven, and he's also not doing it for the money, and he could get much more work in a grocery store, and you can get more money working in a grocery store than you can if you're getting a PhD at a university. And so people don't come to get a PhD at a university because of the money. There are lots of other good, steady jobs. And this could have said, instead of grocery store, working at Bain Consulting, being in investment banking, being a hedge fund manager or a venture capitalist. We don't do it. We don't have the same motivations as all those folks have. Okay, but why? So why do they do this? All right, what is it about being a gunslinger that's so appealing to all these guys?
It's only a matter of knowing how to shoot a gun. Nothing big about that.
Hey, how can you talk like this? Your gun's got you everything you have. Is that true? But is that true?
Yeah, sure, everything. After a while, you can call bartenders and faro dealers by their first name. Maybe 200 of them. Rented rooms you live in, 500. People eating hash houses, 1,000. Home, nothing. Wife, nothing. Kids, nothing. Prospects, zero. Suppose I left anything out?
Yeah. Places you're tied down to. None. People with a hold on you, none. Men you step aside for. None.
Insults swallowed. None. Enemies. None.
No enemies?
Alive.
Okay, so the Magnificent Seven, mainly, they like autonomy, right? They want to be able to do what they want to do, decide when they do their job, and decide what's important to them. Okay, and then this is, so what happens is they go down, they defend the village, the bad guys come, they go off, and they think they got the whole thing worked out. And then the Magnificent Seven, they're all 7 of them still alive, they get on their horses and ride off. And then they realize that it was probably a trick, the first gunfight that they got in.
You came back to a place like this. Why? A man like you. Why?
Okay, so they came back. Most of them got killed. There were only 3 of them left after the second time around. And they already got paid. So they defeated, they thought, Eli Wallach. They got their money. They left. And then when they realized that Eli Wallach had tricked them and the villagers, they came back anyway, and 4 of them got killed. Okay, because they weren't doing it for the money, right? So what is it about the Magnificent Seven that is also not a business, all right? They had 7 different reasons for being there. They were paid below market. They came back after they got paid. And importantly, they really weren't treating the village as a customer. The village was an entity that they felt a duty towards. There's a lot of complicated politics about what all this means in today's world. But the base thing here that this is appealing to is the notion that that the Magnificent Seven were protecting the village because they felt it was the right thing to do. Now there was one member of the Magnificent Seven who thought they were going for money. Anybody know who that character is? If you think of all the Magnificent Seven, most people can name 6 of them, of the actors who played them. Charles Bronson, James Coburn, Steve McQueen, Horace Buchholz, but now there's one left. And that one is the guy who played Harry, who thought that there was a gold mine next to the village. And his name is Brad Dexter. He's the least successful acting career of anyone in the Magnificent Seven. And maybe that's justice because he thought he was going to get down to protect the village because he thought they had a gold mine. Okay, so now let's go switch gears and try to take some things from the actual business literature and apply them in the opposite direction. And most business, a lot of people who love business, in addition to Jim Collins, they also love the writings of Peter Drucker. Peter Drucker, as you can say here, a business is a social group that differs from other social groups in only one way: it has customers. Okay, well, let's go back to the WashU mission statement and see if we can find anything about customers in there. And I would say not only do we not treat our students like customers because of the way we teach them and the way we build experiences for them here and the way we try to convey a liberal education, but we also spend a whole lot of time worrying about what happens to our students after they graduate, and in particular, how much debt they have. And we think about this is a remarkable idea because there's no other transaction I can think of where the people who are selling you something really spend a lot of time worrying about whether you can pay it back. If you're selling a timeshare or a car or something like that, you're not exactly worried about whether people can pay you back. But we go to all this trouble to publicize our debt levels, and we're measured and grade ourselves based on whether our students can pay back their loans. So I think that is a readout of the fact that we don't treat our students like customers. We don't distribute the profits to shareholders, and we can't go out of business if we don't collect enough money. And when you try to run a higher education like a business, so far nobody has succeeded at that because for-profit higher education is a complete disaster. And now we're going to hear a lot about what happened when Donald Trump tried to start for-profit university. And the reason it doesn't work is that this isn't a business transaction that can be framed by typical business terms. And if you look at what has happened to for-profit higher education, the University of Phoenix and Strayer, I mean, the statistics are just mind-boggling. You always hear about this $1 trillion of student debt. A third of it is owed by students who owed for-profit higher education. The graduation rates are below 10%. This particular one, American National, after 5 years, absolutely no one who has gone to American National has paid anything back to them. Now, the reason these these for-profit institutions stay in business is because they collect the Pell Grants, which are the federal student aid for all their low-income students. So they're basically collecting the Pell Grants and then trying to collect as much as they can from these other students as a way to get the margin for their business. And fortunately, the federal government is figuring this out. The Department of Defense has now banned the University of Phoenix as a vendor for the GI Bill. But lots of people who would say we should be giving useful degrees in higher education would look at the kinds of degrees that are given by these places and say, oh yeah, computer system management, healthcare management. These are the kinds of things that the university should be teaching instead of art history and jazz studies. And again, the for-profit schools and other businesses don't really care about whether their customers pay back their loans, and we do. So what is a university? Now, C.S. Lewis is not completely the most popular pundit in the world, but a lot of people really, really think C.S. Lewis is a smart person on both sides of the political spectrum. And C.S. Lewis, so if you're trying to convince somebody of something, and in this particular argument, invoking C.S. Lewis was probably a good strategy. And C.S. Lewis said that the university is a society for the pursuit of learning. And so when people say to me, okay, well, the university isn't a business, what is it? I tell them, well, it's a learning community. And every person in the community is important. Now, as to why I wrote my first book, the logical extension of this is that when the university needs to do something that is a business, we shouldn't try to do it ourselves. That's why when we discover something that's a marketable drug or a marketable invention, we should license it to an actual business that makes decisions based on the kinds of business metrics that I've been saying we don't use here. We're very bad at making decisions purely on the basis of what's going to make money. And of course, that's a good thing. But if we were trying to be a drug company, we might bet on a drug that might not make a lot of money, but it might tell us a lot about biology, the process of finding it. Okay, well, that part of it is good, but not if we told people that we're going to return profits to them. And so when we need to do things like test and produce and market proprietary drugs or diagnostic tests, we're better off licensing those to a business, work out some deal where we get part of the upside if it works, and let business people make business decisions about how to go about commercializing our technology. And not people like us who get mesmerized by beautiful ideas and really smart people and things like that. The other reason why we need to license our drugs and our other know-how is because, unfortunately, we're losing the argument about why research is important. If somebody asks me, Holden, why do you guys do this? Why do you have all these big buildings? And let's say they're just asking about science. Why do you have all those science buildings down at the medical school and on the Danforth campus? What are you doing in there? Why is it important? I would say, well, 6 billion years ago there was this huge explosion in the Earth formed. And then it cooled off, and there was hydrogen sulfide in the atmosphere, and eventually that got used up, and we had oxygen. And by the time I got to that part, I would have lost them. And I would make the same kind of argument about literature or music or anything else. I would want to start at the very beginning and explain why it's beautiful. I want everybody to understand why knowledge is beautiful. But unfortunately, it's obvious that we're not at a point where everybody is ready to engage with us on that. And so if we want to draw them in, we're going to have to do something that some people may view as quite instrumentalist, which is to say, well, you got sick last week and you took that drug that made you better, and WashU scientists helped discover that. And then they might say, okay, well, tell me how that works. Well, we attract really smart people from all over the world, and we give them a lab and we let them study whatever they want to, and the reason for that is that you really never know where science is going, and so people have to do things that are driven by their curiosity. And then you kind of keep going until you can draw people into a conversation that might have been a lot easier 500 years ago about why knowledge's sake is so important. And so I think that is where partnering with business and doing a really good job of it and respecting the lines so that business people are making business decisions and we're doing what universities do is important, because we need to work with business to help make the case for why research is so important. And then you can make the case for why scientific research is important, because business relies on the science that we produce. And then you can get to, and this is why liberal education is important, because we want to train truly curious people, and we need them to be just as excited about Miles Davis as they are about Charles Darwin. So that's the long-term project that we all need to get on with. So I've told you about two things that I believe are not a business, university and the Magnificent Seven. And when you think about it, there are a lot of other things that we care about deeply that aren't business, thankfully. I think the best analysis of why the Magnificent Seven went down to the village and did everything was because they felt a sense of duty. They all had a different narrative about why, but that in the end, that's what they felt. We love genius even when it doesn't make money. Miles Davis has to be the worst business person in just about there ever was. And he sure spends a lot of time on my Apple Music screen. We love rebellion. That's probably not the picture you thought I was going to put up when I said rebellion. You might have thought I was going to put up this picture or something that looks like this. The civil rights movement and the birth of America were not business transactions, that's for sure. Always dangerous to put up religion. And so I came up with a good way out of that. But in the end, it's the joy of learning and discovery that brings us here. And that is what we have to get everybody to understand if we're going to make higher education the movement that it needs to be to make the world more equitable and to give us more understanding. And so you have given me 45 minutes to make my case for that, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have from here. So thank you all very much for coming. Yes.
So my name is Provost. I'm the faculty here, and thank you very much for taking the time to come here and do this today. I'm in the healthcare management area. There's something happening in healthcare that's kind of relevant to this, I think. There's a professor at Harvard named Michael Porter.
Yeah, I know Michael Porter. Yes.
Okay. And of course, his big thing now is called value-based healthcare.
Yeah.
And the idea is that consumers of healthcare should be in a position where they can make educated decisions about what value is. And he's come up with a formula.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've read his formula.
Outcomes divided by cost. And I think that there's some application of that perhaps in education as well, at least in the minds of the quote-unquote consumers, because they're looking for value in education. And of course, they are looking at the income that a degree can buy them over, say, a 20-year lifespan, divide that by the cost of that degree, and that becomes
Right.
the value. And if that's in the minds of the consumers, how do you react to that in your field?
Okay, so the first part of your question was, well, no, first you were just outlining Mike Porter's analysis of value-based healthcare, and then you were sort of repurposing that for education. Well, let me go back to the first part about Mike Porter and value-based healthcare. So I'm a student of literature that Mike Porter and Blake Christensen and Jim Collins and Peter Drucker have generated. And I think they have a lot of common sense ideas that are useful, depending on whether you're employing them in the correct context. And Mike Porter's big thing is, he hates IKEA. But that means that IKEA is a really good business because businesses have strategy. And if you have a strategy, then you are selecting for customers. And so the fact that he doesn't like IKEA means that IKEA is selecting for a specific group of people. And that's what businesses should do so they don't all compete with each other on the same footing. He wouldn't like it that I said that's all the works of Mike Porter condensed into a minute and a half, but that's basically his thing, and it's a powerful idea for business. In healthcare, I've worked at two schools that had two of the best medical schools in America and huge hospitals. And a lot of people would say that the healthcare part of the university is more of a business than we are up here. And I don't agree with that either. I think that the medical center is a healing community. It's a healing and learning community, just as we're a learning community. And the best readout of this is, why would we be spending $1.5 billion to build more beds on Kings Highway if we were a business? If we were a business, we would buy land out on 40 and I don't drive around that much, so the other highways that's close to the highway where you could get off and have surface parking, and if you needed to get oncology drugs or have a baby, it would be really convenient. That's what we would do if it was a business, and we could spend less money on the skin of the building. We're spending a lot of money to make that bed tower look like it's part of big barns. So that could all be done a lot cheaper and probably generate more revenue. But coming to if you're in St. Louis Barnes, or if you're in the rest of America, the WashU Medical Center, because you're really sick and you want to see the best, or because you just really care about the person that you're with and you want to bring them to the best place. That's part of what they do that doesn't compute on the balance sheet. So I would say healthcare, especially in terms of academic medical centers, are subject to a lot of the same analysis that I've been talking about. Now, as far as whether people can take a formula like that and calculate it for their education, some people are doing that, and that is kind of what has gotten us to this uncomfortable spot that we're in. And
of course, magazines already put the
I'm sure. And people calculate, the salary that you get when you graduate with a particular major and divide it by how much you put in and say this is what you should invest in. If that's what people want, then we're not going to get more art history and jazz studies majors. And we cannot afford to let that happen, because we have got to have an educated citizenry if our democracy is going to do everything that we aspire for it to do. So yes, you can do that calculation. Some people are, and we've got to fight against it in every sense of the word. And what I think about is interesting is people will do that for a college education, but they would never do that but for high school. What if we went to everybody and said, well, we're going to calculate, which high school, what classes you should take in high school that would prepare you for a job, and we're not going to worry about teaching people American history and world history and a foreign language and all the things, and trig, and all the things you learn in high school. Nobody would think about that, and yet we've allowed that to happen to college. And so if we can keep people believing that knowledge is beautiful and that's why we should teach it in high school, then we ought to be able to do the same thing for a college education. Yeah, Jeff?
Some people are making those calculations.
Okay. Well, we need to push back against that too.
Well, I'm kind of wondering about, I'm trying to put your conversation with the one from last week, which seemed to be oriented towards how does WashU evolve to meet the demands that we know exist in the coming, say, generation, as well as those that we can't quite see. And I also, from my, place as a person who's been in the business world, I really struggle with the notion that a university isn't a business.
Yeah.
Most businesses are private businesses and don't make their primary decision on what they do based on shareholder return. They don't. And even businesses like Google don't do that. They specifically said when they went public, if you don't want us to do, they said, here's the way we're going to run the business. If you don't want to do, be part of this, then we won't do it. I just, WashU, we have Hank Weber running a significant real estate portfolio that's internal, right?
Yes.
There are a lot of business functions here, and there's so much. I guess the biggest concern I have is that there's so much we can learn from business, and you know that from your experience with Olin, that is definitely applicable, mainly management, tactics and strategies. That I kind of hate to see business demonized, and I don't think you're quite demonizing business. The other is, I don't think we should talk about business in a monolithic way, because businesses do things very, very differently, just like schools and universities and colleges do things very, very differently. WashU's not in danger of going out of business like the one that you referred to earlier. They did something differently. We don't know specifically what they did. But schools do things differently. Businesses do things differently. There's so much to learn from business people, and I know that we have business people primarily compose the board of trustees. And
you got one sitting right behind you there, if you want to talk to him. So,
it's great. It would be very advantageous to engage business people and recognize, and again, I hate even talking like that because it sounds so monolithic, but if we can recognize that we do engage in business practices rather than keeping business and business people at arm's length, like there's some radioactivity we don't want to catch anything. We can certainly identify best practices that can be applied and make WashU, that much better. And just like business people have to recognize, business people don't respond to what customers want. If they did, they'd be out of business yesterday. They respond to trying to anticipate what's coming.
Yeah. Well, I'm not saying we can't learn from the business world, and I'm very passionately not saying that we shouldn't partner with the business world when we want to do something that's better done by business than by us. So I'm sorry if it sounds like I'm demonizing anything. In fact, what I'm advocating for is a more mature partnership than what we have. And I think that's going to require talking about a lot of this stuff in a more interactive way, just like we're doing today. And it's complicated. And the reason it's going to be such a challenge is that we spent almost an hour talking about this, and we were just scratching the surface of the whole thing. And it's really hard to get people into deep conversations today. So that's why I appreciate everybody being here to be part of it. Yeah.
I'm Pat McHugh. I'm a retired St. Louis public school teacher. Early life, I taught music for 10 years. I taught adult education. I was an adjunct. I was a TA, you name it. But anyway, the problem for universities starts before the universities. And that is where the earlier grades, they're not learning critical thinking. And let me just make a sidebar.
Sure.
Finland is number 1 or number 2 in the world in education. Only 10% of their people, the highest performing students, get to be educators. And then they are paid like doctors and lawyers. And it's run by unions.
Right.
Okay, in this country, I'm sorry, if you have a pulse, you can become a teacher. And the biggest problem is democracy demands an educated populace. And if you look at what, and then we talk about for-profit. The other problem is for-profit media. that doesn't tell us anything we really need to know. So we're in deep, doo-doo.
Yeah.
And it starts way before the university, because the love of learning and the appreciation of learning, that has to start down in the early grades in high school. So then you wouldn't have to argue that this is important.
Mm-hmm. It's true. But I think one of the things that universities need to do is we need to be very careful not to blame K through 12 or anybody else. If we have students here and they've shown up here and however they came, at my last school, most of the students went there because of the basketball team. And here, people come here because of the beautiful buildings or the how great the dorms are, or some people come here specifically because of the academic programs. But once they're here, then we have a wide open shot at trying to give them a liberal education, and so we need to take ownership of that moment when these students get here and endeavor to give them to teach them all the things that we want them to know. Yeah.
Well, I was an adjunct, I won't name the school, and I begged them to let me give them a reading test, because I had taught reading in first, second, and third, never mind. Yeah, but anyway, my average student read on the 6th grade level. Now, universities don't do this well. This has to be done down below, and it's not your fault, but they shouldn't come there this way. And you don't need to blame anybody, but we need to change the whole education system in this country.
Right on, and thank you for all you've done. Yeah. Yes?
I want to watch you, so I want to say this.
Let her go, and then, sorry. All right. Yeah.
Listening to her talk, first, I got my degree here in statistical analysis, and I worked in business. And then I later got married and had kids, and I started teaching. And the biggest problem I found is, with her talking, is that the textbooks never apply. I taught math and science, and it's like just memorize. They don't apply it to anything. And in the real world, to prepare them for the real world, and that's just about like kindergarten, first, second, grade. But I would take business sections in the newspaper, and like you're gonna buy a CD, you just can't go by the biggest percentage. You got to figure out how much you can make it by the end of the year. My husband is an architect. I would take his architectural drawings to my classes. If you're going to be in construction, build or anything, you can't go a math dummy. You've got to figure out how to translate these drawings into the right size so you build it correctly. And the students will say, why do you do this? No other teacher does that. You're going to be in the real world in a couple of years. But the big thing, and I don't know if the United States is ever going to wake up on it, we had a lot of foreign students, and all the foreign students were like, at home, everything is applied to the real world and not a textbook. How come they don't do this here? And they're like, why do so many companies hire foreign students? Because that. Because all my foreign students were so far advanced than the ones here.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, similarly, as I said, I went here, so I want to say this carefully, and it's not directed here as much as, using the example of the Magnificent Seven. The impression, the reason it worked ultimately was they did go back.
Right.
And they convinced the people who were with you, and the people then joined the rebellion.
Right.
Yeah. The impression people are getting, whether you say business or academia, is that, and I think less so of WashU than many, but the impression they're getting, especially at the elite universities, is that you would go to them with that, and they would say, well, that's lovely, but we want to stay in the schoolhouse, but we'll write you a great analysis of how you do the rebellion and then hand it to you. but don't ask us to leave the classroom. So until you get that sense that we're all in this together, you're never going to have that kind of movement.
Last comment.
My wife and I are both from St. Louis.
Yeah.
So both of our children went to Tufts because, of course, they wanted to go to school.
Right.
And I remember dropping my daughter off at Tufts when we got there the first day, and the provost there had a meeting with all the parents.
Mm-hmm.
His name was Sal Gittleman.
Yes.
And he showed us a list of all the subjects that people can major in, and then he put up all these businesses. And he said, try to match up what they majored in and what they're doing now. And of course, the person that majored in art was now CEO of IBM, right. And the person in music was another CEO or in some other, had nothing to do with what they majored in. And I think what he was telling us was that a wide liberal arts education is the best thing that you could ever do in your life. And it really worked out well for our children because my daughter took things like art, opera singing. She played African drums. She took a course in African drums when she was playing at Harvard School. Mm-hmm. And as I sat back, I said, this is what I'm paying for. But as it turned out, I think it was the best education they could ever get. And but most important, what we're trying to teach our kids is how to think, how to communicate, how to get along. That's in the world that they will get in after this. Mm-hmm. And I think what we're lacking now is also empathy and understanding for other peoples and other cultures. And that we have to do a better job.
Yeah.
And I think that if we do that, then we are getting to our mission here. And I think that that's what you are trying to provide. And something like that can never be a business. It has to be a passion to get students to go into this and to believe in this concept. And if you believe in that concept, I think you'll be turning out great students and great people that will lead our country in following years.
Well, that's a perfect way to end this talk, so thank you very much.